Oh my God. Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we strive to make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Vokey.
And I'm Heidi Savnani. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are really excited to speak with Bethany Lockhart Johnson. And we hope you will let us know where you are watching from. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or our YouTube channel at Math for All. And we would love to interact with you in the comments as well.
Yes, yeah. We are super excited about our guest today, Bethany Lockhart Johnson, and she's going to be talking to us about this question: how do we as educators heal our own math trauma and help students find joy in exploring mathematics? I feel like we've been talking like around this kind of question
Mhm.
with certain pieces of it, so maybe this will tie some things together for us. So I am going to read Bethany's bio. Bethany Lockhart Johnson is an elementary school educator, curriculum consultant, and author. Prior to serving as a multiple subject teacher, she taught theater and dance and now loves incorporating movement and creative play into her classroom. Bethany is committed to helping students find joy in discovering their identities as mathematicians. Currently, Bethany is the co host of Math Teacher Lounge, a podcast and video series created specifically for K 12 math educators. In each episode, co hosts Bethany and Dan Meyer chat with guests, taking a deep dive into relevant and inspiring math and educational topics. So let's bring her in.
Hi,
Hello.
how
Well,
are you?
we are great. We are great. We're happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, sure.
Yes. We have been like waiting to ask you this question based both
Mm,
on your topic, and then I heard you speak a couple years ago at Ignite, I think it was. So, um,
ShadowCon.
yeah,
oh,
yes,
you did?
ShadowCon, yes, that's
How
Yeah.
true.
come I didn't see that? That's
Because you didn't
really
go to that one.
rude.
It's online somewhere. You can find
Yes,
it.
it is.
I'll have to look it up. Okay.
So, we love to ask, what's your math story?
Yeah, right? Like
Hmm.
actually my husband was like, "So what are you talking about today?" I'm like, and he's like, "Math?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, okay. I'm going to go take the baby for a walk." So, no. He's not anti-math, but he knows that I do love talking about math, and that was not always the case. I first want to say I appreciate you starting with this because I think it's something that educators should talk about,
Mhm.
and it does tie into the topic today. I think it's something that is so important, whether or not you're sharing it with a colleague or with other folks in your community. Even if you're just exploring what's my math story, it can really kind of shine a light on some of the ways that you interact with math, both in your conversations and with your students if you're a teacher. So in my household, my dad my dad's a mathematician. He's math computer science, but I kind of avoided talking math with him because I'd ask him for help on something, and it became, and then if if we take that out to calculus, you can see how, and I'm like, I just needed to know,
Dad,
about
it
this.
was third grade.
Yeah, and he has such a passion for it, but his brain actually like looks at numbers and things differently, and so I just, it was just kind of something. You didn't go ask your dad for help on math. But math was around me. He had a Apple computer. I wish he had invested in Apple
Oh,
because he
yeah.
had a really
Hmm.
early computer, and yet, um, so so math was always just kind of like, okay, well, I just do math. I interact with math. I felt very comfortable with math. And then when I got to middle school, I there was my parents got divorced, and there was a whole bunch of change and transition, just like upheaval. And we know that our kiddos do not walk into the classroom
Mhm.
and like leave that at the door, right? I remember really consciously trying to create little routines and rituals to help my students be as present as they can. But like that comes with
Mhm.
us. And it definitely impacted academics. And so I found myself kind of checking out and getting further and further behind. And, I read all the time, so I could write the essays and kind of go around that. But once
Mhm.
you miss one day of math, well, the next day's a little trickier. And then, it compounds. And I think I just started feeling, I remember a classmate saying, well, why don't you just do tonight's homework? Like, I know you have all these past assignments. Why don't you do tonight's? I had no idea what was going on that night. So I thought it would be a very good idea if between eighth grade and ninth grade, I took this like accelerated geometry class that summer so that I could kind of like overcompensate or whatever. So that in ninth grade, I wouldn't take geometry. I was going to take intermediate algebra, trigonometry in ninth instead of 10th. You see, so it was going to help me like catch up, right? Well, I had no idea what I was doing. It was like this. It just became this cycle of like it being very, very painful and me
Mhm.
feeling like I didn't belong there. And then I had a
Mm.
teacher affirm that by saying, "You do not belong here."
Oh, wow.
And
Very clear language.
right. And I think in hindsight, I really didn't belong in his class in terms of the skill level, the background knowledge, because I didn't have it. I needed more support than he was interested in offering and that he was able to offer. He expected his students to enter with a certain background, and I didn't have that. But instead, what I took it to mean is I don't belong, like math doesn't belong to me, and I don't belong in spaces where math is happening. And so I think for me, after that moment, anytime I thought about math, it was like, even if I wasn't consciously saying you don't belong here,
Mhm.
it it were together. And it wasn't until probably about it was after college, because in college I took like the bare minimum GEs of whatever I had to, just fulfill those requirements. And then it was after college, and I remember having a conversation. It was just like that memory came back of like that, you don't belong here. And I was really looking at it and saying, like, this is not okay. And
Mhm.
I can't really pinpoint like where for me it was bravery came from, but I was like, I'm gonna go take a math class. Like maybe I can do this. So I went to our city college, and so I already had my degree. This is
Mhm.
just for me to I remember it was a placement test, and I remember I was sweating because you sit down at the computer and it's like, it responds to what you
Mhm.
got right or wrong, and it got harder and harder, and I did no idea. So when they finally spit out the results, they said, "Oh, this is the right class for you." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I think I better start, let's start way, way back." They're like, "Oh, these are your results." So I took the class. I spent every single like class, like before every single class period in the like free tutoring center, I became kind of like just determined that I was going to
Wow.
get through this class.
Mhm.
And I loved it. I loved it. And I all of a sudden felt more capable and more competent. And I started speaking back to that voice that told me that I can't do this or I don't belong here. And then, I had always wanted to be a teacher, but I had always kind of said I can't be because I couldn't teach math to kids,
Mhm.
right? Because I don't belong with math, right? So once I started speaking back to that, when I went to get my credential, math methods was very challenging, but I wound up falling in love with teaching math. And yeah, and so now the bulk of my like work outside of the classroom and in professional development and consulting is around mathematics, K
Mhm.
through 5, and it brings me such tremendous joy. But it took a lot of talking back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's amazing because most people when they tell their story, there is usually a turning point. At least that's what we have found. There's some turning point and it's typically external, But for you, it was
Mhm.
entirely internal. And I find that fascinating. Most people don't just go take a math class when they don't have to.
That is true. I did. So there were two things. One was I took a swimming class
Mhm.
because I wasn't afraid of the water. I enjoyed the water, but I didn't really know how to swim. And I
Yep.
took a math class. And I think it was this like these areas in my life that I felt either pain or shame or both around
Okay.
that I was like, wait, could I could I do something about that? You know, it was
Yeah.
a really important moment and I felt really proud of myself and
Yeah.
I
Well,
had
you're in charge
no
of
idea.
you, right? You're in charge of you.
Mhm.
You know, I love me some Oprah. You know, Oprah. If you saw ShadowCon, you know I love Oprah. I could
Yes.
talk to we could spend the rest of the time talking about
Yes.
Oprah. I will.
We could. I went to see Oprah one time. She's amazing.
How are you going to drop that in there, Molly, and then not expect me to
Right.
follow up with it? Like, I want every detail.
I know.
Where were you? Okay.
All right. After the show, no one wants to hear about that except you. Oh my gosh, that's too much. That's a great story. That is a really great story. It's so
Mhm.
inspiring, especially um, because you're a woman. And I think lots and lots of women feel the way that you did. And I think lots and lots of women do not take charge in the way that you did. And I think it's really inspiring.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I really feel grateful for like, you know, I think we all have those things in our life that are like these splinters or these little raw spots, right? And, you know, they'll get poked sometimes. And we have ways to like navigate around the discomfort or numb the discomfort or address the discomfort or whatever, right? And so in by no means have I like sorted out all those areas, but this was a spot I could point to
Mhm.
that and say that hurts right
Mhm.
there. That hurts. And I don't like that it hurts every time I think about, you know, math class and every time I think about, you know, being capable and competent and I'm potentially letting it keep me from this career that I'm really excited
Mhm.
about. So I think it's worth it. Like now I really enjoy talking about it because I think there's a lot of folks who
Mhm.
have pain around math and
Mhm.
around their experiences with math and some people are interested in changing that and I there's zero pressure to change it but if you
Mhm.
want to there's ways to do it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Also, I think it's interesting because some people go into teaching regardless of their feelings about math,
Yeah.
and then
yes,
that permeates their teaching if they
totally.
haven't taken charge or haven't
Mhm.
had the opportunity to realize that I too can do math and I can be
Mhm.
good at math.
Mhm.
So, we need
Yeah.
more of you out there. Need more of you out there. I
So, yeah, this leads us into our kind of main question when we got right to. So, how do we as educators then heal our own math trauma and help students find joy in exploring mathematics?
Yeah, well, I first want to say I think there might be some people who see the word trauma and
Mhm.
think like trauma really, but you know trauma looks all sorts of different
Mhm.
ways, right? There are um and trauma gets expressed in all sorts of
Mhm.
different ways. But for some people, their experiences in school, not just around math, but around
Mhm.
language arts, around
Mhm.
peer interactions, is associated with trauma. And typically, I think with math, if you've had a challenging year, it can be hard to break that pattern, right? It can be hard to course correct
Mhm.
because there's it's so cumulative and it's so um unless you have a teacher
Yep.
or you know sometimes it's folks with a tutor or whatever but I didn't have that when I was growing up but if you have someone that can help identify where those like spots where it's like oh well of course fractions like you know finding common denominator of course that's tricky you're having trouble with with multiplication
Mhm.
with Of course that's tricky. You need to practice your fluency, and then you're going to find that finding common denominators is like actually a lot easier, or whatever those pieces are. And I think especially now around all the Zoom and, there's so much talk about like unfinished learning or learning loss. And I really try to stay away from deficit language around that, because it's no matter what, I think our ideal schooling situation, you still see this math. Oh, there's my dog. Is everything? I apologize.
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, I think that this idea of when we have trauma in school and how to adjust that is very, very challenging, particularly for kids who've had those experiences. And how
also for teachers, right? Because it just keeps getting passed down the line.
And I apologize for that.
Totally fine.
I have a 1-year-old. It's kind of interesting. You think you have like all of this, like, oh yeah, I've got this time to this time, because she always naps during that time. Let me tell you.
That's never the case.
No. You are not in charge of your world.
So what I would I totally lost my train of thought, but what I was wanted to say is that I think, first of all, folks who have a lot of math anxiety, they will often avoid math. They'll avoid careers that might include math. If somebody's experiencing math anxiety, they, it can show up in really unexpected ways, right? And I think, I remember reading this article and somebody was saying, well, no one would ever like kind of jokingly say like, well, I'm terrible at reading. I'm not a strong reader.
Right.
I'm not a strong reader. But we say that about math all the time. Like, I'm not a math person. Oh, math is not my thing. I'm not a math person. But it's really this way that we need to look at how we're talking about it and start speaking back against it, right? So when you say, I'm not a math person, or, oh, math isn't my thing, if you're a parent and you're with your kiddo, oh, well, I was never good at math either. Don't worry. Kiddos pick up on that, and it impacts the way they see it, like as their ability to be capable, their ability to navigate these tough problems, instead of saying, wait a second, you know what, this is tricky. Let's try to figure it out together. Or, you know what, I'm not sure how to do that. Let's find somebody who can help, right? And that doesn't have to mean hiring a tutor. That doesn't mean it can look all sorts of different ways. Hey, I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to figure this out. But the point is that this idea of being a math person, or saying math is only for a specific type of person, or a person who has a specific skill level. And so that's what I really want to speak back against.
Because one of my teachers had, a few years ago, I took a picture of it because I loved it so much. There was a sign outside of her door. It said, how to be a math person. Number 1, be a person. Number 2, do math.
Yes. Yes.
I thought it was so funny.
Perfect. It's perfect. It's that I've seen the one. I've never seen that. I've seen the how to become a better reader, and it's 10 ways to become a better reader, and it's read. Or how to have a beach body. Have a body, go to the beach. It's like those things that
I guess I already have one then.
Yeah, we say these things like, oh, I couldn't possibly do that, or I couldn't. No way. Like me, I had to tell myself I couldn't go take a math class. First of all, I am older than all of these people in this class. Like, I don't even know if I fit in the desk. I have to show up and like navigate campus. Like, I can't do that, but guess what? I did it. And I showed up. Those people in that tutoring center knew me, because I showed up, I sat down at my table and I would do my work and I'd ask questions. And, maybe you don't want to go and, take a math class. But what I would encourage, particularly if you're an educator, is to really take a look at your own experience with mathematics. And Molly, what you said is so spot on, that the way that we think about math, the way we think about it, impacts the way that we present it to our students. And so you'll see people who have, they kind of dip into the math instructional minutes. I had a teacher tell, because I talk about this with a lot of people, I had a teacher tell me, I saw that I needed to look at it when I realized I was always like, oh, it was like math was right after lunch. And she would like, oh, I'm going to do a story time. And then I'm going to do this. And, oh, you know what? We could go to that assembly during that time. And it just chipped away just enough that impacts how much you
Yeah.
have to work with your kiddos, right?
Mm.
And she wasn't doing it maliciously. She wasn't
Yep.
doing it like, oh, my class, we can go, if it's math time, we can definitely go. It was just like, she's like, I didn't even realize I was doing it until I looked at it and said, okay, I'm missing like 10 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 3 minutes here.
Mm.
Well, that adds up to days of math instruction, right? And another way it can be, the way, like the language that you use with your students or the professional development that you choose to engage in. So the way that you present material or the way that you interact with students who are struggling, I've had teachers, I've heard them say, I wasn't a math person, right? Or I'm not a math person, or not being willing to look at student work or feeling like they don't want to take these risks with their students because they're too afraid that if a student says something or has a way of solving it that they don't understand, that they're going to be uncomfortable or they're not going to know what to do. They want to go by the book and they want it to be very rigid. And nope, that's not right. And but it was right. It's just that they were do you know, does that make sense? They were
100%.
uncomfortable with it because all of a sudden this open-ended question of what do you notice and what do you wonder? Well, who knows what they could notice and wonder, right? Like, and that lack of control, and in this area where you feel anxiety or trauma, you can feel so vulnerable.
I think you're super spot on about having to talk about this, because I feel like when we talk about growth mindset, with Heidi and I have presented endlessly on growth mindset in the work that we do, and I think we often will talk about people's experiences from the beginning, and it does open them up to just being able to be vulnerable and being able to feel a little bit more comfortable with trying math that they may otherwise feel embarrassed to do because they're not confident enough. And just really, you're right about just having to start that conversation.
And I wish, I do wish it was, I mean, I think it's been brought up, but that was part of pre-service, right? That when we're doing math methods, that we talked about it and we brought that into the room and that we addressed that, so that as pre-service teachers, the same way that we hope that pre-service teachers are thinking about biases they have in any subject or with any area, the way that we address this, because we realize we're going to be in front of these students and we're going to be we may keep them from things that we're scared of, right? So I think that would be something that I would really encourage, is how can we get that into pre-service math methods programs? And it doesn't have to be, I've talked to professors about that. They're like, we hardly have any time as it is, but it's worth it. It's worth it to spend that class period or that part of that class period, or have, I had a friend, her son's first assignment was write your math autobiography. And this was in high school. And I was like, yes, yes. How amazing to have that invitation to look at your relationship with mathematics, right?
I think in many colleges there aren't enough math methods courses or
absolutely.
Anyways, so even just adding another math course to, although I shouldn't even say that, my daughter's in college and she's in her second semester of college and she's on her second math course, so maybe I should pipe down, but I don't know that she's had the opportunity to explore that. I'm not sure that question's been asked.
Well,
I'm sorry. No.
It varies so much by program too. I think if you like do a survey of, which I've done, unfortunately, weirdly enough, different math pre-service programs, it's like it ranges from like one math methods course to like 4 or 5 math methods courses. And so I think the variance is so great and people's experiences are so great. And I I wonder sometimes too about the way that we set math up as almost like elite, where you're not a mathematician if you're a second grade teacher because you do easy math, whereas you don't think about the complexity of what these teachers are building with their students, that understanding that they're supporting, that everything else builds up, like kindergarten teachers. Like if you don't, when we look back at those areas and think about the big systems that these teachers are tasked with helping students create in their minds and gain understanding of, like that is powerful enough.
Yeah.
That's joyful enough of a math experience. It does not have to be, Calc 3 or whatever you have decided is
Right.
the math. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
that. And we don't often value the math that's taught at those younger grades as well.
Well,
Right.
not
Oh,
to
that's for
mention-
sure.
Not to mention that many of these teachers do this with math anxiety and a poor understanding of the content themselves because of their math
Yeah.
anxiety. So it's unfortunate.
Or teaching, very procedural because, like you said, they don't understand the conceptual. They don't have the conceptual understanding, and or they were never given the opportunity to learn it. And it wasn't until I was going to teach. I was. I had when I was a student teacher, my second placement was with a fifth grade class. And I realized I had learned how to work with decimals and fractions to an extent, but I had no idea about the conceptual understanding about fractions and partitioning and like really to teach it. And it was really daunting, but I felt like I had to go relearn it. But I had fun with it because I was like, whoa, I never knew. The connection between decimals and fractions. I didn't, it hadn't been presented to me in that way. And so, when teachers are able to, in whatever capacity they have, to look at that anxiety and to look at what might be holding them back, then that can be a really great way to say, okay, I'm going to address this in some way. Maybe I'm going to go to a workshop, or maybe I'm going to talk to a colleague who I know really does like math and ask, hey, can we work on can we co-teach a lesson together? Or can I come observe your lesson? Or, and if you go to a workshop and it feels like it's not welcoming, then go to another one. Because I go to a lot of math conferences, and 9 out of 10 of the sessions I go to, it's like I feel like I leave with my community having grown because folks want to talk about it and learn about it. And it has been the rarest occasion where I felt like, I didn't that maybe that wasn't the right fit of a session, like go to a different session then. It's I don't want in any way to make light of all the things that teachers are navigating, especially right now as we are navigating a global pandemic and we're navigating exhaustion. I don't want to say, oh, on top of that, heal your math anxiety, nor do I want to
add it on.
You've got some free time, turn off the Netflix because that's all you're doing. No, right? No. Come on, no. And I also don't want to pretend that I have some like magic, like this is how you solve, like this is how you fix it. But I do think sometimes we don't realize the drain that anxiety or that trauma takes on us, the exhaustion. And by even starting to kind of dip your toe into like, what is it I'm really worried about? Or by saying, for me, I feel like I learn best in a community. And so for me, something that was really helpful was working with a colleague and saying, could we unpack this together? Could we look at student work together? I have no idea what the student did, and that really made some space and didn't take more time because I was going to look at the student work anyway, but it allowed me to have conversation about it and to get a little bit more comfortable with some of the language and some of the ways that I could then revisit the ideas with my students.
So powerful, so powerful to do work with other teachers. I just feel like it's all right there. You just have to have
it's so
the opportunity to do it.
Well, and having the vulnerability too. I think there
Yes.
is that, even though in like much of society will be like it thinks it's okay to not be a math person. Still, when you're an instructor and you're, like you're a teacher and that's what you're supposed to be teaching, it is hard to admit this is problematic for me, or I don't feel comfortable teaching this, or I can go through the motions, but I don't really understand what it is that I'm teaching.
Right.
Having that willingness to be that vulnerable and to admit that to a colleague is really challenging. And I think, when teachers do that, or when they're able to find opportunities with a coach or with a consultant or whoever that they can have that conversation with, it does go a long way towards at least beginning that conversation of thinking and beginning to examine that anxiety. It doesn't mean it goes away.
Yeah.
Like there are still instances in like my own experience where I'll bump up against the problem and like the sweat, all of those things.
Of course, yes.
And it's, it like part of it's admitting that, like, and so what is it about this that makes me so uncomfortable? And like, am I, the fact that I'm like supposed to be here is, like the person coming in to help, like, well, no, sometimes I don't know what this kid did.
Right. But that's the thing.
Look at that.
Having enough confidence to understand that you aren't always going to have the answers. You are going to have to struggle. And I feel like when I work with teachers, I try to project when I'm learning, because I don't know everything, but I'm coming in as an expert, and I don't claim to know everything either, but I think you have to have enough confidence to be able to say, let's figure this out together. But it really does take a lot of confidence to be able to say that, I think.
But I also want to, I want to acknowledge that it is a reality that some folks just don't have that space in their grade level team or at their school site. And there's been times when I didn't feel like I necessarily, the colleague I'm talking about, I actually went to another grade level. It was somebody from another grade level that I got to talk with. And, sometimes it's certain things you talk to your team with, and sometimes, you have a partner teacher that you feel really connected with and you guys can be vulnerable. But if you don't have that, I think a lesson that one of my mentors gave me was like, when I was feeling kind of alone on some topics that were coming up, and I was like, I don't really know who can I talk to at my school. She's like, I know right now it feels like you're in this bubble because this is your professional learning community at this moment. She said, but go to Twitter, go to, go, like, there are so many, contact an author of a book that, that you have admire or that you're wondering about. There are so many different folks out there. So if you don't have that, and you don't feel like you can be vulnerable in your space, there are places where you can be. And so I want to acknowledge that isn't the reality for everyone. And for folks who do have that, it's amazing. But yeah.
No, you're right. Twitter is an excellent place to be able to explore virtually. It's so many people out there that are willing to be vulnerable, and so it can be a place where you can do that.
Yeah, and you don't have to deep dive into the like debates, and so, you could just lurk, or there's the hashtag MTBOS math teacher blogosphere. You can go there and just kind of poke around and just like observe, or just be curious. Or if I've taught kindergarten math, I would follow kindergarten math and just notice and wonder, and then maybe you'll see somebody that says something that kind of jives that you're curious with. Send them a message and say, hey, I'm wondering. I had somebody reach out to me, and we ended up having this great conversation about some student work that we're not in the same district, but we were able to share this image, and we and she's like, I'm going to try this problem with my students, and it's so exciting because it is about building that community, and we can learn so much from each other.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, and I want to do a little plug of this book I'm reading. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this Just
Don't cut out.
Okay.
children's literature.
Oh.
Whoops. Allison Hintz and Tony Smith. Let me tell you. So this book, it's talking about how to take stories and read alouds and mathematize, right?
Awesome.
So the reason I want to share it right now, besides the fact I'm loving it, is it can be a really, I think, safe entry point if you're not sure how to kind of spark some joy around math in your classroom, is finding a story that you love and mathematizing it.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage, there's a hashtag, I think it's mathematizing children's literature, but you could take a story like Jabari Jumps or a story 10 Black Dots. I mean, you can name a book. You can, Last Stop on Market Street. You can take a book that you love reading with your kiddos and you can ask questions that can help about like what the students notice, what they wonder. How many do you think that is? Was that a lot? How far do you think they had to go? How far do you have to go? Little things that can start incorporating mathematical concepts in the story, but you're reading a children's book and you don't have to have the answers. And in fact, I feel like I really do. I'm like looking to them for my students for the answers. I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
So I'm reading that. And I think that can be, oftentimes people are like, well, I don't even know where to start. That can be a way to start. You're doing a read aloud. What's a question you could ask that could engage students in ideas about quantity, ideas about measurement, length, comparison, counting, ooh, let's count the caps that he had to wear on his head. How did the peddler carry that much? How much do you think that would weigh? Wow. How many monkeys did that take? These caps for sale was the book I was talking about. Anyway.
I think we got that.
I'm sorry, I don't have all the authors at my fingertips. I feel terrible. I'm just throwing out these titles.
I think you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Super good stuff. I was in a 6th grade classroom yesterday, and the teacher read
Circumference
of the Dragon of Pi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally messed that up.
The Night. Yes. I know what you're talking about. But yes.
She read the whole book to a 6th grade class, and they sat there and they were making comments throughout and asking questions, and I was in awe of the fact that they stayed with it the whole time. And then it was all about Pi. She's doing a ton of stuff for Pi Day, and so it was awesome. It was awesome.
And you can, photocopy, well, respecting copyrights, you can photocopy a page, not for resale, and, share it with your students or project it up on the board and notice and wonder just one illustration or, create story problems from the characters. And yes, children's literature is not just K-5. I mean, I love that it was a 6th grade class. Like,
me too.
You can read it to college students and it's, I don't want to pretend that I have the answers to alleviate math anxiety, but I think it always is there to a certain extent, but I think we can just get stronger and stronger at talking back to it. And we can pay more attention to the language that we use around math and our ability to do math, and that math is a space for us. So it doesn't go away. I still get nervous. I still but I'm quicker at talking back to it now.
But less nervous, right? I mean, you can't be as nervous as you were when you were 18 years old.
Oh, well, that's for sure. But, it's still, I have a multiple subject credential. There's, I would love to kind of dip my toe into, middle school curriculum and high school curriculum and almost like learn it for like that middle school and high school me that didn't get to really experience it and find joy in it. But, but so there's definitely still with Math Teacher Lounge, Dan is such a proficient mathematician and, we'll solve things together. And sometimes I'm like, okay, let me talk back to any nervousness I have, but I mean,
no pressure there. No pressure.
Dan Meyer, you intimidator, you. No,
it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Dan. You're great and wonderful and supportive. But
great.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bethany, tell us how can our listeners learn more about you and what you're doing?
Well, I am has been coming in a panic, like, wait, but when did it, I have found that I've been slightly absent from Twitter. However, I am on Twitter. So at Lockhart EDU, I will see it eventually. And I have the intention to post more things. And you can also find me at Math Teacher Lounge. It's a program co-sponsored with Desmos and Amplify, and Dan Meyer and I are there talking to people that we admire, and we're learners, we're lifelong learners. So come hang out with us in the lounge.
Yeah, they have great guests for anybody who has not seen their show.
Thank you.
It's a great little show, and they have good banter between each other. So it's really nice.
No,
yeah, about like 30 minutes of it gets cut out because Dan's like, okay, stop, Bethany, stop.
That's why we go live. That's why we're like, this is what you got.
Yeah, you're like,
they're as real as they come.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But it's one of those things that you can. Molly and I were actually, she was watching and I was listening as we were driving back today to one that the potluck math that you'd done even before. And it's just that idea of, always being able to go back and re-listen to something quickly or think about it. And it was for the holidays, but then there was something about pie and I was like, oh, I need to go back because I've already started this with a middle school group that I'm working with, but that's another thing I can add to that.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, and I showed your episode with Fawn to my teachers a month ago or so, and
problem solving. What is a problem?
Yeah, there was great conversation around it. So you're really providing a nice bit of professional development for teachers. So it's great.
Thank you. And I would also say there's we had a couple episodes about public math with Omo Moses.
Yes.
And, there's talking about really accessible ways to interact with our environment and mathematics, which I think is also another great place to start. Counting steps on the way to the car, the little things that you can do that can help, one, have fun and help shift the way we think about math.
Yay.
Absolutely.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
You're really busy with your baby and
no, it's so much fun.
Stuff you've got going on, so we appreciate your time.
I know he's listening. He's like, math.
Yes, I love math. I love math. Give me some numbers right now.
1, 2. I said no. I'm gonna start over. 1, 2. Sit down. No, that hasn't worked. He's 1. He's not.
All right. He only needs to count to 1 so far, so he's doing great.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was fun. All right.
So we are, we're off for a little bit, but
a few weeks. But when we come back on March 23rd, we will have Carl Oliver on. And I can't believe we're approaching the end of the year already.
No.
March seems to be the never-ending month, but
particularly here in Massachusetts where it's snowing today. So
Correct.
We're just gonna not do spring yet.
No,
not yet. But
it'll come eventually, and then we'll have 3 days, and then it'll be summer. It's fine.
Yeah. So no problem. Well, we appreciate everyone being here, and we hope that you will continue to comment along, and we will get back to you as we can. We look at all of the different platforms to see your comments. So if you would like, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Facebook. So we are in all of those places. But until then, we hope that you will keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for all. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us.